Okay, it's 6:15, so I'm going to start. I've unmuted myself, so thank you for your patience. It seems like it's a comedy of errors here today. I had trouble with the generator, then I got that going, then I had trouble with the internet, then I had trouble with my computer. I had to restart my computer. Then I messed up I was in a hurry, so I messed up the YouTube feed, and I had to start that over. So it was a whole, whole shebang today. But we're here now. Uh, I think everybody, hopefully everybody can hear me. Um, so what I thought I'd do, we finished this a series last week, so I'm going to start a new one this week, and I'm going to base it on the Mahānāma Sutta, because it's in the Anguttara Nikaya. It's the 11th sutta in the Book of Elevens, and it has basically to make up the number 11. There's two lists. There's a list of five qualities or virtues to be developed, and then 6 contemplations. And this sutta was given by the Buddha to a layman, Mahānāma, and the contemplations he recommends particularly to Mahānāma, who asked, what can we do as a layperson with a busy life and many duties? What would you recommend for our practice? And the Buddha gave this sutta. Mahānāma occurs, this character, he was a Sakyan living in Kapilavatthu, and he occurs in other suttas in the Samyutta Nikaya. In one of these suttas, he expresses to the Buddha the difficulty he has maintaining mindfulness. He says, I'll go and listen to one of your talks, or I'll meditate, and then I'll go out into the street in Kapilavatthu, and it's a very busy town, and there's horses and elephants and people going to and fro, and I lose my mindfulness. And then it occurs to me, this is a very busy place, and there's a lot of traffic here. What if I get run down by a stray elephant or something and get killed at this time with a confused mind? What will happen to me? And the Buddha told him, don't be concerned, Mahānāma. You will have a good death. It's just as if someone threw a pot of ghee into a river and it broke on the rocks. The jar would remain broken in the bottom of the river, but the ghee would float to the surface. And it seems from some other contexts, and he's in more than one sutta, that Mahānāma was probably a stream winner. So a stream winner upon death never takes a lower rebirth. In any case, this particular sutta that we're dealing with here in the Anguttara, the the Buddha was dwelling among the Sakyans in Kapilavatthu in the banyan tree park. And I'm reading from the sutta here. Now, on that occasion, a number of bhikkhus were making a robe for the Blessed One, thinking that with this robe completed at the end of 3 months, the Blessed One would set out wandering. Mahānāma the Sakyan heard about this, approached the Blessed One, and paid homage to him, sat down to one side, and said, Bhante, I have heard a number of bhikkhus are making a robe for the Blessed One, thinking that with his robe complete at the end of 3 months, the Blessed One will set out wandering. Bhante, with all of our various engagements, how should we dwell? So basically, Mahānāma is saying, I'm a busy man. I've got a busy life. Well, how should I practice? The Buddha says, Good, Mahānāma, it is fitting for you clansmen to approach the Tathagata and ask, Bhante, with all our various engagements, how should we dwell? So then we get into the main teaching of the sutta. And first of all, the Buddha lists 5 qualities to be developed, which are faith, saddha, energy, virya, samadhi, wisdom, or panya. And I missed sati, was number 3, mindfulness. So then he talks about the six contemplations, or anusatis. These are kinds of meditation that are using the reflective mind, using the thought and imagination to contemplate aspects of Dhamma. And these are meditations that are not given so much. People don't speak about them so much in modern time in the West, I find, but they're very traditional right here from this sutta, and they're written up extensively in the Visuddhimagga. These are a contemplation of Buddha, contemplation of Dhamma, contemplation of Sangha, contemplation of devas, contemplation of virtue, and contemplation of generosity. And the Buddha goes to talk on in this sutta to talk some details about these contemplations. So what I'm going to do, this lecture today is probably not so bad that it was messed up, because it's just the introduction to the series. What I'm going to do is go through these 11 factors, the 5 qualities and the 6 contemplations. And I noticed someone in the chat asked me to reference the sutta number so they could look it up. It is in the Agudra Nikaya, the Book of 11s, the 11th sutta, Mahānāma Sutta. And I think it's significant that the Buddha, the context, and this is always when reading the suttas, one should pay attention to the context, like who is the Buddha speaking to, what was the question asked, and so on. And then you can get a better understanding of it. And the Buddha, in most of the suttas, the Buddha is speaking to the bhikkhus, to the monks. Here he's speaking to a lay follower, Mahānāma, who begins by basically saying, I have a busy life, I have many duties, much to do. What would you recommend for my practice? And the Buddha suggests these contemplations. And I think that's important, because I have heard people say they think that the contemplative meditations, the anusatis, are some kind of advanced practice and too difficult for beginners. But here's the Buddha is recommending it to a layperson with a busy life. Here's something you can do. You can try to turn your contemplation onto these qualities. This is an application of, in a very specific way, but in a general sense, it's an application of yoniso manasikara, which is a right reflection, bearing the mind onto attributes of Dhamma and bringing them into the consciousness and the thought stream. So the mind is directed towards those things. So really, that's all I wanted to do today, to introduce this sutta and this series, and we'll begin next week with the first of the qualities to be developed, which is saddha, faith or confidence, and that will be the theme of next week's talk. So, and again, I apologize for the technical issues that these things happen, and we'll turn to questions and answers. So we'll see if anything comes up in the chat. Ajahn, okay, here's the first question. Ajahn, should we understand that recollection of Buddha can lead to jhanic breakthrough and or stream entry? Well, it would not by itself lead to stream entry. And these anusatis, because they involve a thought process, they are limited in that you will not go beyond first jhana, and even to go to first jhana, I think it's not. I think there are more suitable vehicles like the breath or a kasina for entering jhana. I don't think that's really the purpose of these meditations. It's to elevate consciousness and raise the level of consciousness and brighten the mind. Will samsara itself end? I mean, everything has to come to an end. Will there be a time when all beings in samsara become enlightened? No, I don't think that's really in the cards. Ajahn Chah was asked about that once. He said, "Are you worried about the samsara running out? That's like an earthworm concerned about running out of dirt." The name of samsara means running around in circles, and I think that's it's more. It's kind of like a state of being or a way of holding reality, rather than a place or a thing or a time. So I don't think you can really talk about the beginning or end of samsara. I asked a question about attaining sotapanna earlier in the chat stream. Let's see if I can find it. Oh yeah, here it is. Okay. You had mentioned in a previous talk that jhanas are natural states of mind hindered by the hindrances. Is this true for becoming a sotapanna? Admittedly, it feels very daunting. Yeah, basically it is. Basically, it would be true that for attaining stream entry, there needs to be a high degree of purification of the mind. Really, the difference or the key factor with stream entry as opposed to jhana is there has to be a radical letting go, a renunciation of samsaric becoming, a disengagement. Is nirodha, the disenchantment, or nibbida is disenchantment. Nibbida leads to nirodha, cessation. So there has to be nibbida has to be developed, which comes from clear seeing and seeing reality as it actually is. Once you see the three characteristics in depth, emptiness and impermanence and suffering, and then you let go of that samsaric process, you stop doing samsara, then nibbana occurs naturally. And that requires a radical letting go, which you wouldn't be able to do if you're caught in the hindrances. Do we all start at a certain form like minerals or insects? Well, not really. I mean, you could, in some sense, you could say that biologically we probably evolved from simpler forms, but in the long run of samsara and in the process of rebirth, there's no starting and no ending. It's just a complete changing of form, and we can go up or down. Ajahn, how can I, who struggle with fear of sickness, be free from it at once? And can you understand Thai? No, my Thai is very weak. I used to have better. I mean, I haven't lived in Thailand for about 30 years, and even when I was in Thailand, I found the language difficult, and I had a very rudimentary level of discourse, but I can't. I've even lost that. I don't remember it. As for fear of sickness, the main thing for any kind of fear is abandonment of self. If you have a self view, and if you see the emptiness of self, and you realize that the nature of samsara and the characteristic of dukkha, we're all subject to sickness, old age, and death. That's uh, inevitable result of just being human. We're going to experience sickness. We're going to get old. We're going to die, and it's there's no wisdom in fearing it. You rationally do what you can to stay healthy. That's just rational, good sense. But to live in fear of sickness, this just then it becomes a sickness itself. It becomes debilitating. If you just face the reality that all beings get sick, and you just drop that consideration. You once mentioned that the Buddha advised against working in the medical field. I don't remember ever saying that, and I don't think the Buddha ever said that. I'm not sure where you got that from. Working as a doctor or a nurse is I would think is good livelihood, because you're helping beings in suffering. And I don't recall the Buddha ever saying anything against it. The Buddha says a noble at Anguttara 610. The Buddha says a noble disciple who has reached fruit, understands instruction, practices the same meditations and reflections. What is a different level of practice? Well, for a Seka, that is one who has attained to a glimpse of Nibbana, or in other words, a stream winner, they still have work to do, and these reflections will benefit them as well. There would be a different level of practice in the particularly of contemplation of Buddha Dhamma Sangha would have a different tone, because, and we'll get into this next week with the talk on faith. It's one of the characteristics of a stream winner that they have flawless faith in Buddha Dhamma Sangha, whereas the Patujana, the unawakened person, would use these meditations to try and develop that faith. And that faith is already developed in the Sotapanna, but he can gain new depth of understanding. Okay, next one. Is the Upekkha of fourth Brahmavihara and fourth jhana the same mind state? Yes, it is. There might be some difference in what's the word, like perspective or focus. In the Brahmavihara, the Upekkha of the Brahmavihara is Upekkha directed towards persons. So there's a neutrality of regarding all beings as having essentially the same quality, just not having one favored over another. So it's a specialized type of Upekkha, whereas Upekkha in the fourth jhana is a feeling tone. Primarily, it's that the mind is in a very peaceful state. So yeah, so there is a difference. When we talk about Upekkha, it can sometimes get a bit complicated, because Upekkha, depending on the context, can refer to a sankhara or a mental formation, or it can refer to a vedana or a feeling. And in Brahmavihara, it's really both are operative. And in the fourth jhana, we're primarily talking about Upekkha as a vedana or a feeling tone. And it exists there at a very deep level rather than common Upekkha, common neutral feeling. It's like a profound peacefulness. Next one. Is the anagami attainment a regular occurrence at Theravada monasteries, since they are removed from sensuality? It's extremely rare for anyone to attain to the third level anagami, and you can never know who actually has these states of mind because we don't talk about it. Can you say something about relinquishment of the assets? I think maybe you mean asawas there. Relinquishment of the assets. I'm not sure if that's what literally you mean. Um, Maybe you clarify that, and I'll come back to you. How does rebirth make sense with genders and cola consistent in this realm? I don't know what that is either. Cola consistent. I don't know. As far as well, the first part of that, how does it make sense with genders? Um, it's possible to be reborn and be reborn to the other gender. That does happen. It seems like it's from the stories that, just going by the stories that recount people's rebirths in the canon and commentaries. It seems like it's more common to remain in the same gender through a series of rebirths, but it does happen that one can change from male to female or female to male kind of in a rebirth. How to sustain the stage of non-self and seeing emptiness all the time? Um, the way to approach that is not so much on the theoretical level, like there can be some. I just gave a talk here about this topic. There's some benefit in understanding on an intellectual level and knowing the theory of not self and so on, but that only goes so far. What's more important is that you apply it immediately to the events and occurrences in the life and in the consciousness, and just take it on a case by case basis. Whatever arises, this is not me, this is not mine. Just look at it one thing at a time, rather than trying to see it as an abstract general principle. To see it specifically, like when a thought formation or a feeling arises, rather than identify with it, you just observe it and recognize this is not me, this is not mine. Okay, sometimes when I meditate, I have gaps in my experience. In this sense, I don't recall anything from that short period, perhaps a few seconds in length. I know I have not fallen asleep because I remember waking up when I do fall asleep. What causes the gaps, if I may? Yeah, that's possibly, there's more than one possible thing happening. And if you're quite sure you're not falling asleep, you could still be dropping momentarily into bhavanga, which is a kind of unconsciousness. Or it might be that the samadhi is so deep that the mind doesn't take an object for a few moments in sequence, or not a vivid object. There seems to be nothing happening. It's nothing to be concerned about. Okay, colors of humans, ages, and it stays consistent in time and balance. Still don't know what you're talking about. I was reading in Diga 14, Mahānāma Sutta, and it seems that all the Buddhas were male. Yeah, that is true. Is this a requirement to become one? Is a female meditator disadvantaged? No. as compared to no. The Buddha specifically, when he was asked, can a woman attain to stream winner and so on? Can a woman become an arhat? He said yes. There's no disadvantage to being male or female in terms of meditation. But a Buddha is an extremely rare development. And not only is every Buddha male, but they're also always born into either the Brahmana or Kshatriya caste, and they're always born in the middle country of India. This is a limitation, like because it's such a rare occurrence to be a Buddha. Now, a woman who's alive today could be a Buddha in the future, but she would have to be reborn as a male to be a Buddha. But she can attain to stream entry or arahantship at the same, with no more difficulty than a male. The commentary to that passage explains the reason why. It's a kind of an odd one. It's that a Buddha always has 32 marks. You may be familiar with the story of the Buddhas, when the Bodhisattva, when he was born, and the wise men examined his body and the marks on his body and said he will either be a great king or a Buddha. And one of the 32 marks is a particular, we would say, a deformity of the genitals, of the male genitals. And since a woman doesn't have a penis, she can't have that particular mark. So that's the explanation in the commentary, for what it's worth. If one does not commit bad karma of speech and action while intoxicated, is it still bad karma? Yes, yeah, getting intoxicated is bad karma because you're making confusion in the mind. How can I make a recollection of virtue, devas, etc. while I'm at work? Yeah, when we'll probably talk about the actual practice of this when I get into that part of the series. But let's say there's for many kind of meditations, there's two levels or degrees. One is when you sit down and practice it, and obviously you can't do this at work. This would be your meditation time. You sit down and practice this as a focused way. But then, if you do that enough, you have that familiarity with that mind state. This works very well with metta, for example, loving kindness. If you practice metta, loving kindness, as a meditation, then you can call it up at any time, just that feeling. That's the same with these anusatis, that it should only take you a moment to call up that that thought or that feeling, to kind of remind yourself of it. But that, to be effective, would probably require you doing some work in developing the meditation formally prior. Next question. I have heard you say in jhana one is immune to sword, fire, and water, but how can rifle bullets, anti-tank, and anti-tank cannons and rockets? Well, I know there's a couple of different approaches to this. That the stories in the Visuddhimagga take it very literally, like someone goes into jhana and they get boiling oil poured on them and they're not affected. But what seems to happen more often in the world, and I've known cases of this in Thailand and elsewhere, someone develops metta, loving kindness, and evildoers can't harm them because they're pacified immediately. They lose their, and this applies to wild animals as well as savage humans. That for example, there's one story in Ajahn Mun's biography of a monk who Thai monk who did a walking pilgrimage to India and flew from Thailand to India. So he had to go through Burma. And his bad fortune on the way back, World War II broke out. Because Thailand and Burma were on opposite sides in the war. So he was captured by the British. They thought he was a spy. And they were going to execute him as a spy, but they couldn't have the heart to do it. They kind of were just ready to shoot him, and they let him go. And I've heard of wild animals like tigers being disarmed in the same way. What do you think of the Buddha teaching non-self in order to escape Mara and his horde to influence our minds through defilements, and then influence us to identify with greed, hate, and doubt? Yeah, well, it's a very broad question. What do I think of the Buddha teaching not self? Well, that's to escape Mara. Well, that's the essence of the Buddha's teaching. By that's kind of the magic bullet or the key to everything is abandoning thoughts of self, and then Mara can't find you. Next one. Even if I understand Dhamma at the intellectual level, I still can't stop suffering. So the intellectual conscious level of my mind can't liberate us. We need a deeper understanding. Yes. Yeah, at the intellectual level is not sufficient. In fact, it may not even really be necessary. It's but it can be to have an intellectual understanding of Dhamma can be an aid or an asset if one is not doesn't mistake the finger for the moon. That doesn't mistake the recipe for the meal. Can use it as a kind of a guide, but you have to have a direct experience of Dhamma for it to be real and to have a change, an effect to change you. You won't be transformed or liberated just by understanding things on a theoretical level. Do you have a technical theoretical definition of false speech? Yeah, I would say that false speech is deliberately expressing that which you know to be untrue. So it's not false speech if you're mistaken. But if you are deliberately trying to mislead someone by stating something that is not in accord with reality, then you're creating delusion in their mind, and it's a very bad karma. What is the Buddha recommended practice for people who want to develop the divine eye? That's any of those psychic powers like that. They come as a result of mastery of the jhanas. In reference to Nibbana, this is peaceful, this is excellent, namely the stilling of all preparations, the relinquishment of all assets, destruction of craving, detachment, cessation, extinction. Yeah, I haven't seen that word assets put in there. That must be a particular translation. I'm trying to remember what the actual phraseology that I'm more familiar with is, or where it comes from. But I can see what it is, what it's getting at with assets in the sense of your attachments or things that you, and not just material things, but your attributes, your qualities, what you identify with as making you you. You have to relinquish all of that. Is increase in population from more beings coming from the animal realm? Yeah, mostly. Some are probably coming down from the Deva realm, but there'd be more coming up from the animal realm. Can you give some advice to the word consciousness? What is the definition and how does it work concerning rebirth? Is there a complete new consciousness coming up? Well, consciousness, the English word, is sometimes used in a loose way, but if it's translating chitta or vijnana, then it has precise meaning. It's the knowing. So it's the fact of having experience. So that's something that's immaterial. It's not a substance. It's not a thing. It's a process. There's nothing there. There is no such thing as consciousness. There's just being conscious. And at each moment, it's taking an object. It's a process of taking an object. So what happens with rebirth is that at each moment during your life, your conscious or a consciousness is occurring to take an object. And at death, the same thing happens. If you're not fully enlightened, you're still driven by karma and desire, then consciousness must arise again in the sequence, but the body that it used as a vehicle is no longer functional, so it arises elsewhere. Ajahn, can devas and ghosts physically hurt human beings? And any tips for university students for learning? One at a time. Devas and ghosts physically hurt human beings. Generally, no, and definitely no. If you keep good sila, that's your protection. You can't, no kind of demonic force can find an entry point if you have good morality. Any tips for university student for learning? I would apply the Iddhipadas, the 4 roads to success. Chitta, Chanda, Virya, Vimamsa. They work in for all circumstances, but I could see for learning they would apply. Chitta means that you put your mind to what you're doing. You focus on what you're learning in a whole, with your whole mind. You're not divided. You're not trying to read your textbook and listen to music at the same time, for example. Chanda is enthusiasm. You take an interest in it. You're not just going through the motions to try and memorize things for the test, but you're really taking an interest in trying to understand it. And virya is energy. You have to put in the effort. You can't be lazy. And vimamsa is investigation, which is intelligent curiosity, or really trying to figure things out. So learning can be, it should be a joyful, joyous experience. It's like an exploration if you approach it right. Is the use of the dhyana mudra necessary for entering jhana? No, use of mudras can help with meditation, but I don't think that they're essential. How do some Brahmas have rebirth in a higher plane than before? Do they always go down? Or do some Brahmas have rebirth in a higher plane? Yeah, it would be possible, but it's always more, in any realm of existence, it's always easier to go down than up. Would feeling aggravated be the cause of wanting that moment to be different? Yes, yeah, that's basically what that defilement of dosa amounts to, is not being at peace with the present moment and wanting it to be different. So it's kind of the backside of desire, like desire for this not to be here, not to be with me. I recently met a monk who kept telling visitors things like, "You were my son in past life, you were my disciple in past life. I am more suspicious and impressed by this." He said aloud. No, it's actually not. It's actually could be seen as a Vinaya offense of displaying psychic powers. And it's a relatively minor offense if he's telling the truth, but it's a serious offense if he's making it up. It's not something that should be done in general. What would be a good practice to get rid of aggravation? Metta. If a cat is kept indoors so it's less chance to kill, will that help their karma for the next life? I don't know. I don't really think so. I think with animals, killing doesn't really have this. It's not really volitional in the sense as it is with humans. It's more of a resultant. They're born into that state of being a predator because of what they've done in previous lives. And it's certainly not. If you keep them indoors so they don't kill, then you certainly not dealing with their underlying desire to kill. I mean, that's still present. Do you read the scriptures in Pali? Do you recommend one learn Pali to understand the Buddha's words in true form? I have pretty decent Pali, but I'm not so fluent in it. It's not so easy for me to read as it is in English. But what I will do sometimes, if I particularly want to study a sutta, is that I will read it in English and then refer to the Pali, particularly on passages that I'm not clear about. I'll go to the Pali and study that. And I do think it helps to understand Pali, but may not be so necessary unless you really want to get deep into the study. It may not be so necessary to learn the language, but I think you should, if you're at all serious, you should acquire a technical vocabulary of maybe a couple of hundred words, because a lot of the words in English, like someone was asking about consciousness, and it's always difficult to answer questions when they're based on English words because we're not quite sure what the word refers to. English is not precise in terms of states of mind and so on. It has other virtues, but it's not precise in those things, whereas Pali is very precise. And the technical terms in Pali have very precise meanings that are sometimes confused by the English translation. Should we believe in supernatural powers if they seem to contradict physics, which has been quite credible over time? Well, who knows? I mean, physics has gotten pretty wild and woolly in the last 100 years as well. There's a lot of room for strange things happening. Okay, I'm getting. We should probably be winding it up fairly soon. Let's see what let's go do a couple more questions. Of the four principal Nikayas, which is the best to read for a recent convert? Well, it's easy to answer. Digha Nikaya. You should probably start with the Digha, then go on to Majjhima, and then after that, explore where you will. But I think, if you want to start studying suttas, you should always start with the Digha Nikaya. Reason being that it has some of the most important suttas, and it has some very good narrative passages. Oh, here's an interesting question. Where is Hitler and Stalin now? I would say because of the mass murders, they would probably have to take a lower rebirth. But there is no eternal damnation in Buddhism. So after some period in hell, they could be reborn as humans or devas again. I like the part of the sutta where it says we can recollect our own virtues because it can arouse metta and compassion towards ourselves. Yes, yeah, that's very important. You need to have good compassion and metta towards yourself. You cannot neglect that. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up now. And again, one more apology for the total mess up at the beginning today, but these things happen. And hopefully everything will be more organized for next week. Okay.